Hello, everyone. Welcome to Angular Africa. We are super excited to have you here, as always. My name is Valentine Awe. I'm your host for today, and I'm also here with Oyemade Oyemaja, who is my co-host.
Hello.
Um, so today we're having Ankita Sood, who will be taking us through ditching NG what
NGD.
NG deep,
All right, let
because
me.
I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of code bases. I've seen a lot of GitHub repos where people use ng deep and a lot of it. And so today is going to take us through teaching ng deep. So welcome Ankita, and we are super excited to have you here. You can take it
Thank you.
away. Yeah.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving me your time and attention for today. Uh, so let's see how we can ditch NGD. I'm Ankita, and before we begin, I just want to say that I would really like for this to be an interactive session. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me. And I might have questions for you, so please answer them to the best. And yeah, um, what I'm about to present may or may not work for your team, but it has worked for my team really well to the point that we never ever find having to use NGTeep again. If there's a use case for you that you think might not be solved by what I'm about to present, let's talk about it. It's just an architectural pattern that changes with how we organize, how we, for my team, we have changed the way we organize our code, our components. Oh, yeah, sorry, I flipped the slide. I am a front-end engineer with Dell SecureWorks, and I'm also the host of Angular Nation South Asia, thanks to Bonnie. And we have our meetups similarly on Wednesdays. So I would love for more people, or I would love for people to from this channel to join that one also and just hang out. We get a lot of guests and everything. On this slide, for those of you unfamiliar with NGD, which I don't think there is anyone, but I just have some definitions here on the slide on about what NGDeep is. And the way I understand NGDeep is that it allows the parent component to reach out to their children and be like, listen to me. I will tell you how exactly you have to behave, and there's no other option, and you have to listen. I am the one dictating your styles over here because I want you to act this way, right? Like because you use NGT because you have to shadow pierce through your child component. And they essentially it disables view encapsulation, which again Angular components have. You can turn it off. You can turn off the view encapsulation, and view encapsulation is actually another great topic to talk about, but that's not. I'm assuming if you know NGD, if you know view encapsulation and everything. Um, so another popular alternative is actually view encapsulation, but that just makes everything global. And I really hope everyone understands that. Sure, you have it, right? You have the style sheet embedded inside your component and you have the styles next to it, but it's still global. And if that solution works for you, great. We just prefer to stick to the default encapsulation, which is emulated. We just don't want to risk for the styles to not be wrapped around correctly so that they don't bleed into and become global. And so that option was not for us. And honestly, like if you make something view encapsulation, you've just now opened up Pandora's box because some new person might be trying to fix the CSS without looking at the component because inside the component file is where you turn off the view encapsulation. So they might just want to fix something real quick in the CSS file, and it turns out it's become global. So honestly, like, why do you use NGD even though it's deprecated? And some of the answers that I hear are because while trying to look up a solution, that's what Stack Overflow suggested, or legacy code has it, or like what else are you supposed to do if you want to style something and you want to use ngdeep, right? Is there, does anyone else have any other reason to use ngdeep? I'm curious to know. Feel free to message in the chat. But those are the three main reasons why I think people still use ngdeep. And it's been on my mind for a long time. But why are we talking about this now? It's because recently I noticed in Angular version 12's release highlight that it included a migration to replace the deprecated selector with another recommended but still deprecated selector. So it just for now tells you to remove the slash deep slash, but it just recommends you to use :ng deep, which is still deprecated. And the reason is because as there's no better solution for now. But what if I told you there is? So my solution is host context. And it's useful to apply styles based on some condition outside of the component's view. Unlike host context by itself doesn't work. You have to have a selector inside it. And that's what tells the component what context it needs to be. So it requires very simple re-architecting of your app. And I want you to think about it as the child, like the child component inside which you will have host context styles, you will know how to behave in front of which parent. Like if you're a child component being embedded in a certain parent component, belonging to a certain parent component, and you have to have some different style aspects based on that parent versus another parent. Uh, just having it inside host component would make it different. For example, you might have like an accordion that you've made, and you want that accordion titles to wrap in one view, but be truncated in another. So you will just, based on the parent that's inside it, you will just provide the host context and tell it how to behave differently. And this might be more clear with the example that I would follow. I just have some links everywhere throughout the slide if anyone's more interested in researching what exactly host context is, if they never used it, um, feel free to go through those links. Obviously, I will share the slides after this. So let's really look at the difference between the two one more time. As I mentioned, and as the name implies, ngdeep involves deep piercing, and host context implies the context in which the host, the component, lies. And in using ngdeep, the parent styles sheet is where the styles would be about the child, and using host context, the child component styles would be where its context is defined and how it should be. So, for example, for this demo, I came up with some random requirements that the child component should be styled according to the parent. Like the heading of the list should be hidden in column view, but that's funny, I made a typo. It should be hidden in row view, but visible in column view is what I meant to say here. Background color should be different in row versus column view, and the icon alignment should be different. And what basically, this is the example. As you can see, there's this heading, list of cute dogs, that is there in column view, but not in row view. And as you can also see, the background color changes from red to teal when you toggle between those two views. And yeah, and then this is a matte card, and that has that heart icon inside it, and you just want it to be what is this, right? You just want it to be pushed to the right. And so I have an example of a simple child component that you've made, and I have an example of styling a material component that you're using. And so basically, let's look at the code right now. In the parent component, we have a toggle button, and based on the value of the toggle, we apply a class to the child component's wrapper. So you see the line that I have highlighted, the row container, the value over here is row container, and over here it's column container for the toggles that you will be selecting. And based on that, the the place where you have the list show up, app list is the child component. So where you have the list show up, you would be using the class that would get applied to the wrapper would be row container or column container. Um, so, and this is what the child components template basically looks like. It has the H2, and the visibility of this H2 is what gets toggled, and the tag is basically what gets targeted. In this header, you will notice this very unique class name that I've added, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I just wanted to show you the code. And this is the icon that I was talking about that needs to be flushed to the right. Can I zoom in? I don't know. Can I? Is this any better? I think I'm zooming in. I don't know. I have slides to be full screen, but it's not. Wait, what did I do? Sorry. It's full screen. Is it not? Guess I just have a big monitor. I'm sorry. It's not letting me zoom in any further, so I will be sharing the StackBlitz code for this if you want to look at the code. But basically, yeah, this is a child. It has a mat cat, and inside it, next to the title, we want the icon to show up, and so that's the one that we want to also target. So if you were using ngdeep, this is how you would do it, right? If you would do ngdeep app list to see component, and you would have to, in the parents, I have used SCSS over here because my brain needs all the nesting for me to understand styles. But just like even for CSS, this would be how you use it. You'd use ngdeep and then the child components, and you'll be telling it the background needs to be different. And if you notice in the row container run, I have the display of the H to be none, of the H to be none. The main thing that I want to highlight over here is that it's different based on something, and the style is in the parent, and you have to use ngdeep to dictate how the child component should behave in different situations. And if you were to use host context, you would inside your child components SAS file, a CSS file, you would specify host context. And like I mentioned earlier, host context needs a selector. By itself, it doesn't mean anything. So you need to have the selected value inside a selector, basically a CSS selector inside the parentheses. And you would tell, okay, in row container, this is how you should, these are the styles that you need to have. And inside the column container, these are the styles that you need to have. So that's one way of not having to use ngd when you're styling your own child component. But what if you don't have access to the HTML, or you don't have access to the child component? And that usually happens when you have a material component. You feel like you have to use ngd because really you don't have access to the entire HTML, and you can't use host context inside the child component style file because you can't override material library code. So in this screenshot that you will see how the material components are encapsulated such that In the dev tools is when you inspect it and you'll see the entire markup show up, and then you realize I want to target something that's inside that I don't have access to. Like I want to target styles to in HTML that's inside the material component. That is when we want to use ngDeep and then try to reach out to that and style it. So you feel like you've compelled to use ngDeep and you don't have an option. But and so for this, like I said, I basically wanted the icon to be sticking out to the right so that it's consistent all the time. I just made the header card text to be flex scroll so that the icon next to it is so that basically this is css flex, but basically what's it's doing is telling that the title needs to be the thing that takes the entire space, and I don't have access to this div class because as you can see in the markup, I don't have all I see is mad card title. I don't see mad card header text anywhere while using that component. uh, so what should we do? My example, the way that I have been using is having a BEM naming convention. And this is where things get interesting and also probably controversial because material components are, in all essence, your pure presentational components. In NX terms, they are like the UI kit components. You may want to use them out of the box directly, or you may have a mix of few material components, but some of your own design system components. If you use all the material components all over your app, it's just basically going to look like just material. So most of the cases that I have seen, people use a mix of few material components, the base components, your buttons, your input elements and whatnot, but they also tend to style their steppers to or tend to customize their stepper component or some other material component that they don't want to use exactly how material gives them out of the box. They prefer to customize it, or in some cases have their own brand new presentational component that they then use across the app. And the reason why we use such components, or we create some components, and these are basically the design system components that I'm talking about. The reason why we do it is to make our app look consistent, right? We don't want a button to look differently in one page, but then for it to have different padding or something, different font size or something in the other page. So what I'm trying to establish over here is we want things to be consistent. And so what worked best for us was creating variations of material components stylistically so that they were consistent within the variations that we have. For some pages, we felt that we want the table heights to be different than the other based on the content that they might have. So we just created variations. So in this example, this is a variation of a mat card. This is a variation in the sense that mat card header with long test would be getting this class name. And the way that we name it, it might be, I just put unicorn over here, but it might be the name of your parent component, or it might be the name of your theme. It might be the name of your design system. I know a lot of companies give their global class use names for the global class names based on their preference, and we prefer to have a unique identifier that this is a global class name. And so we create global class names so that when someone's looking at the HTML, they know, okay, this one is going to be global and this one's going to be component specific. So for your material components, create variations of it based on what usage it might have, and focus on the usage in the class name so that it's clear for your developers to know which variation of this component should I use. Suppose you wanted the icon to be right next to the title, then you would then I guess you won't have to use any class name. But suppose you wanted some variation of it, long text, or maybe you want it to show up at the bottom when it wraps up. So specify the class name like that, and then have these styles inside it like that. And that's it. So you won't so all of these would be in global, obviously. But remember, like ng also makes your styles global. So it's just about thinking differently about, it's still global. It just belongs in a global space. So in global space, it means like you have an app component and you have styles for that app, and those are basically global. So you're just space putting it in a different place. It's still global. Your app still compiles. It still reads it the same way. It still compiles it the same way. But with this, you're not only consistent with the variations of components in your design system, you're consistently not having to use ngdeep to have those variations. And that was pretty much what I have. So I'm just gonna leave now. Just kidding. This is the link for my, and if we have time, I can also share the live demo and we can look into the code a little bit and have discussions, obviously. But yeah, if you want to look at the live code, you can do that.
I guess you love our show, don't you?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Uh,
Yeah, I like listening a lot,
time for
and
questions.
yeah. This is I'm not sure how visible this is. I hope this is better.
Yeah, a little bit more. Just one tad more. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. um, in the code,
I,
I like
I think
specified this
Ankita.
is how. Go
Hello,
ahead,
can you hear me?
Valentine.
I
Yeah,
guess.
Valentine, go
Okay,
ahead.
great. So I was thinking before you go into the live coding session, or we can have people ask questions if there's any.
Yeah, sure. I just read live code and so I just shared it.
Okay, any question? Okay, good. Aris, you can take it away.
Thank you. What's the difference of using ngdeep and host ngdeep?
Host deep. How would you? So
I have
okay.
seen
So
it a couple
I
of
mean, like
times. Yeah.
ngdeep. So by host ngdeep, I'm assuming you mean ngdeep wrapped inside the host, right? So you
No,
need to
when you
have
write
a
host, semicolon host, space, ngdeep in one
so
row.
this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when you write this.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
think
basically, what ngdeep does is make your styles global. Whatever you will have inside it, if you don't prepend it with host, and if you write like mat card display none for whatever reason, suppose that's what you're doing, all of your mat cards in all of your app will become display none. Whereas if you prepend it with host, only the mat cards inside this component will become display none.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So it's really important to have this in, if you're ngdeeping anything, it's really important to have host inside of it. And that's where that's what I was saying, that you might have it next to your component and you might have host in front of it, and you could be as cautious as you want, but someone might not realize that this is what is happening, and they might even, and the same thing when you have your encapsulation turned off for new develop, there are more chances for the new person on your team to not be aware about how this bleeds, and they might be like, oh, this is not doing anything, and they're going to remove it without realizing that it's going to affect the entire app. If you customize anything inside this and you don't have host, it basically makes it absolutely global.
Great. Thank you, Ankita, for that. Do we still have more questions? Okay, I think we can go ahead, Ankita.
Yeah, so basically what I wanted to highlight over here is this is the app component, which is the parent, and this is the list component, which is the child. And I have the host context inside over here in the app styles. If I weren't using the host context, this is how I would be ngdeeping and applying the same effects, but I was able to not use that and style the component using host context. And over here in this, in my mat card header, I wanted this icon, this heart icon that is at the end. Like if I remove the global style, it just sticks right next to the name and it's not pushed to the right. So if I have to style it that way, I have to use ngdeep for the mat card header text. But instead of ngdeeping it, I just treated it as a global style and added it here. And this is basically just me specifying that this funky class name might look funky at first, but it really has a meaning associated with it. BOM naming convention is basically like block element modifier, and block is the entire block of code that you're targeting, and element is, if you think of it in Angular terms, so block would be your host, your main component. Element would be the thing inside the main component that you're targeting. And modifier would be the variation, whether it's active state or if it's the state of it having long text or something like that. That's what it would be. So you can have it in global and not, it just is consistent with the other design system patterns you might have. Like you would have, if you want all your links to have text transform something, this is where you'll add it, right? This is where all your globally consistent styles would be. So this is also where you could add the globally consistent material overrides that you would want in your app and wrap it around specific class names. So another thing, like I was saying, you could have this for long text, but you could have this for maybe wrapped text. And so now you have two variations of mat cards that you can use in your app, one which has long text and one which has a wrapped text. And then you can stylistically change it differently and use it differently, and also obviously not have to use ngdeep. So any more questions?
Yeah, Rumek, go ahead.
Cool, thanks. First of all, thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Also really, really cool to see someone using BAM within Angular, which I also do, and always feel like, oh, somebody's going to like say I'm doing something wrong at some point. But it's great, it's great to see that, yeah, I'm not alone. I'm not doing anything wrong. So that's great. I'm wondering, how do you, this is maybe slightly outside of the scope of the presentation itself, but once you essentially say someone was to do the really, really wrong thing and have a lot of overrides for Angular material styles and basically have a lot of global CSS code because of this, and for like many different components and so on. Not saying that, asking for a friend, basically. what's your approach to organizing CSS? Because I mean, with Angular, we have the huge advantage of not using global CSS is the organization components, right? And then we have to go back to the dark ages of having to organize CSS ourselves. But I also like doing that. So I'm just really curious, like, what your approach is to, and maybe if you have any favorite resources to recommend around this or anything like that. Just curious.
Yeah, great question. And also, it's something that I've realized while working that I'm really passionate about, because as we keep onboarding more people, the single most common question is like, I want to have this, like, where should I add the style? Like, should this be global or should be inside the component? And so then we talk about, then the discussion that I have with my team is, what are you trying to make global? And why are you trying to make it global? If it's something that is not an pre-existing pattern and it needs to be something that is only specific to their use case, make it look as much local as possible until it really needs to be shared, and then it needs to be global, basically. So if it's just for that page, make it global. But having said that, if it might be that they're the only one who's using a mat card component and they have this case of where they need to style it differently, so that becomes global, and that's where the naming convention helps. So it becomes a global style with a specific naming convention pattern or practice. I mean, BEM is one of them. There are a lot of other naming convention patterns, but BEM is the most common one and most easier for my brain to compute also, honestly. So that's where you decide on the pattern or naming convention that works for you, and have it added in global in a way that if tomorrow someone else also wants to use it, they just use the class name and they don't have to do anything else. I will try to find few of the resources that I reference a lot. I don't have them open, and I would share them in this events comment section later on.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Great.
Thank you.
Great to hear your answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Nat.
Hey, I think George was raising his hand earlier.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Anita. That was a great
Hello,
presentation.
George. Thank you.
Also have all these problems with material, Angular material, and putting into global styles and everything. I was just looking at, I haven't used HostContext before. I haven't seen it. I'm just looking at it now, and I see that it's not supported in Firefox and Safari. Have you had any experience with that?
So that's actually different. If you go to Angular, and I have the link in the slide also, so that is different, but the way that Angular has it is different. And I know I'm not currently doing a good job explaining the difference, but I've seen that. I've seen if you go to like host and host context by itself are not Angular specific. They are just general CSS selectors that you can use outside of Angular also. And that won't work if you're using it with web components. So with web components, if you try to use host context, that's the thing that's not supported in Firefox and Safari. But Angular itself has this link over here that talks about host context. And we have been using it for several reasons. This not having to use ngdeep and use host context is one of them, but we use it for other business cases also. But anyways, yeah, host context is not something that has been deprecated by Angular, and I don't think it would be. And the way that Angular components are generated and rendered in the DOM, the browser, host context works for them.
Okay, thank you. That was clear. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, let me share this link also over here.
That would be great. So Nati, we can have you now.
Yes, thank you. So Ankita, this is not strictly related to NG context, but it's related to the previous questions. In that, in there, I am working in a team of 10 developers, and I find it very often that they create input properties in components for style properties. And for me, it's a no-no, but I don't know how to, how to justify that or how to make it easier for them to understand why it is a bad practice. But for you, is it a bad practice in the first place?
So is it just to apply and based on the
Yeah, like a width
class
or
they
a
apply
height.
ng class? Is
Yeah.
what they do?
Mhm.
I mean, you could write all your styles in line and it's still fine, but it's not really something that is generally recommended, right? So, and the other thing that using input variables really, I try to avoid it because change detection. The more number of input variables you have in your component, the more your component is going to have those change detection life cycles. So just for using styles, I don't see, if I feel personally, and that if there's something that you can do with CSS, why do it with template, or why do it with TypeScript or whatever? Like if there's something, even if it's animation, there's some great animation libraries out there. But if you just want something, a basic level of animation happening for you, you can use CSS for that. And I'm pretty sure you can see performance implications also. Oh, sorry, wrong window. You can also see performance implications if you compare it using CSS or input variables, if you style your components like that. And it does sound like for your case, if you use host context for passing in those contexts in your child, you would be able to not use input variables.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I hadn't thought of that. This is a great answer. I put my money in change detection being triggered because that's so right and that's such a problem. So thank you for that. Yes.
No problem.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. I
Hi,
think you have
Giant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, my question is like I just have to render an HTML that is on my server, and I'm just getting a let's say that HTML as string into my response, and I just want to render that HTML into my component. And the issue that I'm facing is that I just want to let's say limit that HTML to a certain div, and that div has some height and width. So, but that HTML has a different height and width. So it is just exceeding that div. So do you think host context or maybe global styles like using BAM structure can help me here?
So basically you want the embedded HTML to not have its own styles, and you want it to have the height and width of the div inside which you're wrapping it.
Yeah. Pretty much the same.
And the HTML is like you're getting that from server or somewhere outside, and you can't really apply classes to it. It sounds
Yeah,
like that.
right.
Yeah, I think because this is similar to material in the sense that you don't have access to the HTML. So, but with global, I'm pretty sure you would be able to handle it. So even we have a case like that, we get some feed that we just display, and that feed is in super old markup style, and we just display that. We just have to display that, but we created a global class for it so that in the future, if there's some other feed that we have to read and just display, we apply the same class and it also looks consistent. So I think for that, global style would be a good use case for you.
So what do you suggest? Like, should I add a class into my HTML that I'm getting?
Oh, wait, I thought that you can add. So the class, in my opinion, the class would have to be on the div, the wrapper div, and that class's styles would have to be global.
Okay, cool. And that would help me shrink the size or maybe limit the size of that
Yeah, that would
HTML into the div.
override. Yeah, that should be able to override your component style.
Cool, perfect. I'll try that out. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me know if it doesn't work for you, and we can try a few other things also.
Sure, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nati. I think Rob wants you to share the Start Please link.
Oh yes, I have it somewhere. Oh wait, I can actually just share it from here. My bad. Copy.
Okay. While Ankita is doing that, do we still have more questions for Ankita? Oh, okay. Thanks, Rob. Okay. Oh yeah, I think we can have you now since it seems we don't have questions anymore.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again, Ankita, for such a great talk. It's very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I hope you all enjoyed it. So I will just give us a brief list of our upcoming events in Angular Nation. Yep. Okay. So tomorrow we have Anaboka, our very own testing intern, giving a presentation tomorrow on the Angular Impact channel. So we hope to see you there. On Thursday, we also have a Storybook office hours for anyone who uses Storybook. So Kai will be there to actually give out a helping hand to anyone who needs it. So that is also something you should keep note of. And then on Friday, we have the Friday social as usual, and it's just an event for us to get together and just have fun. So we hope to see you there. Yeah, and also just for on side note, the Angular Architect training is ongoing, and I think you can still join. I think this is the first week, or second week, I might be wrong, but I think there's still an opportunity to join the Architect training. So yes, I still have that in mind. So that's most of it. Okay, second week. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. So second week, and yeah, I would highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't attended yet. It's fun, and I think we have a list of alumni members here and people who are currently attending who can bear witness to that. So, yeah. Thanks once again, Ankita. Over to you, Val.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the questions.
You meet Val.
Wow. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ankita, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for all our new joiners too. I can see Michael and some other people. Really appreciate your presence. Do endeavor to join us in our next meetup. Oh yeah, I'm not sure you give that info out. When is our next meetup and when was the
Okay. So our next meetup is on October the 5th, Tuesday, October the 5th.
Okay.
And we're having Aditya. I think is he here? No, okay, he was here previously. But Aditya, and he's going to be talking about the tech behind Compito. It's a project management application that he built. I think it's open source, so he'll just be giving us a brief intro, detailed information on how he was able to build it from the scratch, from the ground up. So yeah, it's a great one, and we should all look out for it.
Cool. So we hope to see you guys on that day. Before we wrap up or before I stop recording, I think we can just take a photo. So if you don't mind, please, you can just put on your video camera so we can have a shot. So we can remember this day that Ankita visited Angola, Africa to give us some magical stuffs.
Thank you.
So guys, hi Edward. So you guys, 1, 2, you can say cheese.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good.
Peter.
To have a great evening, great afternoon, or great morning, depending on your time zone.
Yeah. Have a great
Ankita,
day.
I saw you on NXConf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.